We live in a world where you can talk to anyone, anytime, anywhere. Yet somehow people have never felt more lonely in relationships. We scroll together, but we don't connect. We text all day, but avoid real conversations. And we confuse attention with affection. The internet didn't destroy love overnight, it quietly changed how we value it. Let's talk about how it's slowly ruining relationships today. Constant online validation has slowly taken the place of real emotional connection, and most people don't even realize when the shift happens. It starts innocently, posting a picture, sharing a moment, receiving a few likes, a few compliments. But over time, the brain begins to associate attention with worth. You start measuring your value not by how deeply someone knows you, but by how many people react to you. In relationships, this becomes dangerous because emotional connection is quiet, private, and often invisible, while online validation is loud, instant, and addictive. Real emotional connection requires presence. It requires sitting with someone when the conversation is uncomfortable, listening without distraction, and being emotionally available even when it costs you something. Online validation, on the other hand, requires nothing. You don't have to be vulnerable. You don't have to grow. You don't even have to be honest. You can curate a version of yourself that is more interesting, more confident, more desirable than the real you, and people will respond to that illusion. Slowly, people stop investing energy into the one person who actually matters because the internet rewards attention without responsibility. In relationships today, many people feel neglected, not because their partner doesn't care, but because their partner is emotionally overstimulated elsewhere. When someone is constantly receiving attention from strangers, compliments from people who don't know their flaws, admiration without effort, it becomes harder to appreciate the quiet love sitting right in front of them. Emotional connection feels slow compared to instant validation. A deep conversation cannot compete with hundreds of likes arriving in seconds. So people start to emotionally outsource their needs while expecting their partner to still provide loyalty, security, and commitment. This is where emotional intimacy begins to erode. Partners stop turning toward each other for reassurance and start turning to their phones. Instead of saying, I feel insecure, they post something provocative. Instead of asking for affection, they seek attention. And because the validation comes from many directions, it creates the illusion of abundance, making one person's love feel replaceable. The relationship suffers not from lack of love, but from misplaced emotional priorities. Online validation also distorts self worth. When someone depends on external attention to feel desirable, they become emotionally unstable. Their mood depends on engagement. Their confidence depends on reactions. This creates pressure within relationships because no partner can consistently compete with an audience. Love becomes performative instead of personal. People start asking themselves not, do I feel understood, but do I feel admired? And admiration is not intimacy. Over time, this dependency on validation makes emotional connection feel insufficient. Silence feels like rejection. Normal days feel boring. Healthy relationships, which are built on consistency rather than excitement, begin to feel empty. People confuse peace with lack of passion, stability with stagnation. The internet trains people to chase stimulation, not connection, and relationships are quietly paying the price as emotional depth is replaced by digital applause. Attention becomes more valuable than understanding, and being seen by many feels more important than being truly known by one. Social media has quietly reshaped how people imagine love, turning something deeply human and imperfect into a polished performance that very few real relationships can live up to. Every day, people are exposed to curated highlights of romance, surprise trips, luxury gifts, constant affection, flawless communication, all presented as normal, effortless, and expected. What is never shown is the exhaustion, the misunderstandings, the emotional labor, and the compromises that real love requires. Over time, this distortion creates a dangerous belief that love should always feel exciting, easy, and visually impressive, and if it doesn't, something must be wrong. These unrealistic expectations begin to affect how people judge their partners. Instead of asking whether they feel safe, respected, and emotionally supported, they ask whether their relationship looks good from the outside. Love becomes something to be displayed rather than experienced. People start expecting their partner to be emotionally available at all times, romantically expressive on demand, and intuitively understanding without communication. When reality fails to match the fantasy, disappointment follows, even if nothing is actually broken. Social media also promotes the idea that the right person will eliminate struggle entirely. Couples online rarely show conflict, so viewers assume that true love means never arguing, never feeling bored, and never questioning compatibility. But conflict is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of two individuals learning how to coexist. When people believe that love should always feel good, they become intolerant of discomfort. Instead of working through problems, they internalize the idea that a better partner exists somewhere else, living a more perfect version of love. Another harmful expectation social media creates is constant romance. Grand gestures are celebrated while consistency is ignored. Quiet loyalty doesn't trend, but dramatic displays do. As a result, people start equating love with intensity rather than stability. They crave emotional highs instead of emotional safety. When relationships settle into routine, which all healthy relationships do, people panic. They interpret calm as loss of passion, not realizing that long-term love is built on trust, not excitement. Comparison plays a central role in this illusion. People compare their behind the scenes reality to someone else's highlight reel and conclude that they are settling. They overlook the fact that every relationship has its own rhythm, struggles, and seasons. Social media encourages constant evaluation, making people hyper aware of what they think they are missing rather than grateful for what they have. This comparison slowly erodes satisfaction and creates resentment where none was needed. Perhaps the most damaging expectation social media creates is that love should fulfill every emotional need. People look for partners who are lovers, best friends, therapists, motivators, and entertainers all at once. This places an impossible burden on one person. Real love involves support, but it does not eliminate the need for personal growth, individuality, and self-awareness. When partners inevitably fall short of this unrealistic standard, disappointment replaces appreciation, and relationships begin to crumble under expectations that were never realistic to begin with. Easy access to options has fundamentally changed how people approach commitment, turning relationships into something that feels temporary, replaceable, and constantly negotiable. In a world where new people are only a swipe away, commitment no longer feels like a choice rooted in values, but a risk that limits potential alternatives. Instead of asking, how can we grow together? Many people subconsciously ask, what if someone better is out there? And that single question is enough to weaken emotional investment before a relationship even has a chance to deepen. When options are endless, patience disappears. Relationships require time to develop depth, trust, and understanding. But modern dating culture encourages immediate gratification. If someone feels misunderstood, bored, or challenged, the instinct is no longer to communicate. it is to browse. Discomfort is interpreted as incompatibility rather than a normal phase of connection. People confuse the effort required to build intimacy with settling, forgetting that every meaningful relationship demands emotional work. This abundance of choice also reduces the perceived value of commitment. When someone believes they can easily replace a partner, they are less likely to protect the relationship. Arguments become exit points, boundaries become flexible, loyalty feels conditional. Instead of repairing what is damaged, people emotionally detach while staying physically present, keeping one foot out the door just in case a better option appears. Commitment becomes shallow because the mind is always scanning for alternatives. Easy access to options also fuels unrealistic standards. People start constructing ideal partners from fragments of different individuals. One person's looks, another's personality, another's ambition, without understanding that real humans come as complete, imperfect packages. This creates constant dissatisfaction. No matter how good a partner is, they are compared to imaginary possibilities that don't exist in reality. The relationship suffers not because of real flaws, but because of hypothetical upgrades. Emotionally, this mindset prevents depth. True commitment requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires safety. But when someone senses they are easily replaceable, they hesitate to fully open up. Both partners begin withholding parts of themselves, afraid of investing too much. Love becomes cautious instead of courageous. People protect themselves from heartbreak by avoiding attachment, not realizing that avoidance itself becomes the reason relationships fail. Over time, this culture reshapes values. Commitment is framed as losing freedom rather than gaining stability. Loyalty is seen as old fashioned instead of intentional. People want the benefits of a relationship, companionship, intimacy, validation, without the responsibility that commitment demands. This imbalance creates fragile connections that collapse under pressure because they were never rooted in choice, only convenience. Easy access to options doesn't make people happier, it makes them restless. The constant awareness of alternatives keeps people mentally elsewhere, never fully present with the person in front of them. Relationships stop being a place of growth and become a temporary arrangement, easily abandoned when excitement fades, effort is required, or reality interferes with the illusion that something better is always waiting just one swipe away. Digital communication has transformed the way people interact, but in doing so, it has quietly weakened emotional intimacy within relationships. Messages are sent instantly, conversations happen all day, yet something essential is missing. Emotional intimacy is built through tone, presence, body language, silence, and shared emotional space, elements that cannot be fully translated through screens. When communication becomes primarily digital, connection becomes efficient but shallow, frequent but emotionally distant. Texting creates the illusion of closeness without requiring vulnerability. People can carefully choose words, delay responses, avoid difficult topics, and hide emotional reactions. Real intimacy, however, demands immediacy and honesty. It requires responding in the moment, navigating discomfort, and allowing someone to witness unfiltered emotions. Digital communication removes this exposure, giving people control over how much of themselves they reveal, which slowly limits emotional depth. Misunderstanding becomes common when communication lacks emotional context. A simple message can be misread, tone can be assumed incorrectly, and silence can feel louder than words. Instead of clarifying in real time, people overthink, assume intentions, and emotionally withdraw. This creates distance even when communication is constant. Talking more does not mean connecting better, especially when conversations are fragmented and rushed. Digital communication also reduces emotional presence. When people talk through screens, attention is divided. Notifications interrupt vulnerability. Conversations are paused, resumed, and diluted by distractions. Emotional intimacy thrives on focus, on the feeling that someone is fully there with you. When communication happens between scrolling, multitasking, and background noise, emotional connection loses its intensity and meaning. Another issue is emotional avoidance. Difficult conversations are postponed or replaced with short messages that soften the truth. Instead of addressing conflict face to face, people choose convenience. This avoidance prevents resolution and emotional growth. Intimacy is strengthened through honest confrontation and repair, but digital communication encourages emotional distance rather than emotional courage. Over time, reliance on digital communication reshapes emotional habits. People become less comfortable with silence, eye contact, and deep conversations. They struggle to express feelings verbally and rely on emojis or brief messages to communicate complex emotions. Emotional expression becomes simplified, losing nuance and depth. This weakens the emotional bond because true intimacy requires language that reflects inner experience. Digital communication also creates emotional asymmetry. One person may seek deeper connection, while the other maintains emotional distance through minimal responses. This imbalance leads to frustration and insecurity. When communication lacks warmth and presence, partners may feel unseen despite constant interaction. Emotional intimacy is not about frequency of contact, but about quality of connection. As digital communication replaces face to face interaction, relationships lose opportunities for shared emotional experiences. Small moments, shared laughter, comforting silence, physical closeness are reduced. These moments are the foundation of emotional intimacy, and without them, relationships feel functional but empty, connected yet emotionally distant, familiar but lacking depth. Comparison culture has become one of the most destructive forces in modern relationships, quietly breeding dissatisfaction and insecurity, even where love and stability already exist. Constant exposure to other people's curated lives creates a distorted sense of reality where happiness looks effortless and success appears universal. In relationships, this distortion is especially harmful because people begin to measure their own experiences against idealized versions of someone else's love, forgetting that what they see is carefully edited, not complete truth. When people compare their relationships to what they observe online, they often focus on what seems missing rather than what is present. A partner who is consistent, supportive, and emotionally available may suddenly feel inadequate because they don't post romantic gestures or dramatic moments. Love becomes something to evaluate rather than experience. This mindset slowly erodes appreciation and replaces it with quiet resentment, even when the relationship itself is healthy. Comparison also creates insecurity within individuals. Seeing others receive admiration, attention, and validation can trigger feelings of inadequacy, making people question their desirability and worth. This insecurity doesn't stay internal, it spills into relationships. People start seeking reassurance, doubting their partner's attraction, or feeling threatened by imagined competition. Trust weakens not because of betrayal, but because of self doubt fueled by constant comparison. Another effect of comparison culture is the pressure to perform. Relationships stop being safe spaces and start feeling like stages. People feel the need to prove that they are happy, loved, and successful. Instead of addressing problems privately, they hide them publicly. This disconnect between appearance and reality creates emotional isolation. When a relationship struggles, individuals feel alone because everyone else appears to be thriving. Comparison culture also distorts expectations. People begin to believe that love should look a certain way: more romantic, more exciting, more impressive. They compare their partner's efforts to what others receive, ignoring differences in personality, values, and love languages. This leads to constant dissatisfaction because there will always be someone doing more, showing more, or appearing happier. The goalposts keep moving, making contentment impossible. Over time, comparison trains people to focus outward instead of inward. Rather than asking what they need emotionally or how they can strengthen their bond, they ask how their relationship ranks against others. This external focus weakens intimacy because emotional connection requires presence, not evaluation. Love becomes conditional, based on how well it compares rather than how deeply it fulfills. Insecurity grows when people internalize comparison as truth. They assume that if others have something better, they must be lacking. This belief creates emotional tension, jealousy, and fear of abandonment. Partners feel pressure to compete with imaginary standards instead of building genuine connection. Relationships become fragile under the weight of expectations that were never grounded in reality, as dissatisfaction quietly replaces gratitude and insecurity becomes louder than love. Boundaries are disappearing in modern relationships, and the consequences are far more damaging than most people realize. In the past, emotional and relational boundaries were clearer: what was appropriate, what was private, and what belonged exclusively within a relationship. Today, constant connectivity has blurred those lines, making it harder for people to distinguish between harmless interaction and emotional intrusion. When boundaries weaken, trust slowly erodes, often without any dramatic event to point to.